It was a Tuesday evening when the lights flickered once, twice, then vanished altogether, plunging our small town of Millfield into unexpected darkness. I remember standing in my kitchen, a half-chopped onion on the cutting board, the sudden silence of my refrigerator oddly deafening. Power outages weren't uncommon in our area, especially during summer thunderstorms, but this blackout came on a perfectly clear night in early autumn. No warning, no explanation, just darkness stretching across every window I could see from my second-floor apartment. My name is Alex, and I'd like to think of myself as reasonably self-sufficient. I keep emergency candles in my junk drawer, I own a decent flashlight, and I generally don't panic when modern conveniences temporarily abandon us. But there was something different about this particular outage, a strange energy in the air that made me restless. Maybe it was the timing, just as I was preparing dinner, or maybe it was the text message from the power company estimating restoration would take at least 12 hours. Whatever the reason, I found myself drawn to my balcony, peering out across the darkened complex. That's when I noticed it, a soft, golden glow emanating from the ground floor apartment directly across from mine. Apartment 107. The home of someone I'd exchanged nothing more than polite nods with in the mailroom over the 6 months since they'd moved in. Their name was Jordan, according to the mailbox label, and beyond that, I knew embarrassingly little. Dark hair that curled slightly at the nape of their neck. A tendency to wear faded band t-shirts. A smile that appeared briefly but genuinely whenever our eyes met in passing. And apparently, a working source of power during a blackout. I'd like to say my decision to venture downstairs was purely practical, that I was simply being a responsible adult seeking information about the outage or perhaps assistance with preserving the contents of my rapidly warming refrigerator. But if I'm being honest, there had been something magnetic about Jordan from the first time I spotted them unloading moving boxes. Something that made my heart beat just a little faster whenever we shared an elevator. Something that had me taking slightly longer than necessary to collect my mail whenever I spotted them doing the same. The concrete steps felt unusually cold beneath my bare feet as I descended to the ground floor, my phone's flashlight casting dramatic shadows along the emergency-lit hallway. I hesitated outside apartment 107, suddenly aware of how strange this might seem. Knocking on the door of someone I barely knew during a blackout, drawn like a moth to the only light in the darkness. But before I could talk myself out of it, my knuckles were already rapping against the door. The sound of footsteps approached, and then the door swung open. Jordan stood there, backlit by what I now realized was the warm glow of several strategically placed lanterns. They wore a faded Nirvana t-shirt and jeans with a small tear at the knee, dark hair pulled back in a messy half ponytail that somehow looked effortlessly attractive. "Hey, neighbor," they said, recognition flickering across their features. "Power's out, huh?" I laughed nervously. "Everywhere but here, it seems. I noticed your lights from upstairs." "Not exactly lights," Jordan replied, stepping aside to reveal the source of the glow. "Just some old camping lanterns. But I do have something better in the works. Want to come in?" And that's how I found myself stepping into Jordan's apartment, a space I'd imagined countless times, but never actually seen. It was surprisingly orderly, with minimalist furniture and walls adorned with vintage concert posters in simple black frames. But what caught my attention was the contraption sitting on the small patio just outside the sliding glass doors. A generator, clearly homemade, with various parts that looked salvaged from different machines. "Did you build that yourself?" I asked, unable to hide my impression. Jordan nodded, a hint of pride crossing their face. "Been tinkering with it for months. Never expected to need it so soon, but I guess tonight's the perfect test run." "Does it work?" I asked, moving closer to the patio doors for a better look. "That's what I'm about to find out," Jordan replied. "Want to help? Could use an extra set of hands." There was something in the way they asked, a mixture of confidence and vulnerability, that made it impossible to decline. And so began our adventure, working together to test a homemade generator while the rest of the building sat in darkness. Jordan explained each component as we worked, how they'd repurposed an old lawnmower engine, modified the alternator from a junked car, and constructed a frame from scrap metal. Their hands moved with practiced precision, adjusting connections and tightening fittings. I tried to focus on their instructions rather than the way the lantern light played across their features or how our fingers occasionally brushed as I handed over tools. "So what do you do?" I asked, holding a flashlight steady while Jordan connected two wires. For work, I mean. Engineering, obviously. Jordan laughed. Not even close. I manage the used bookstore downtown, turning pages. The generator is just a hobby. My grandfather taught me how to build things, fix engines. Said everyone should know how to make something useful with their hands. Well, if this works, it's definitely useful, I replied, thinking of my gradually defrosting freezer upstairs. What about you? Jordan asked, glancing up briefly from their work. What keeps Alex from apartment 204 busy during daylight hours? The fact that they knew my apartment number sent a small thrill through me. Graphic design, mostly freelance. Nothing as practical as building power sources from scratch. Hey, we can't all be preparing for the apocalypse, Jordan joked, then grew more serious. Almost ready for the moment of truth. Just need to check the fuel mixture first. What happened next caught me completely off guard. Jordan leaned in close, so close I could smell the faint scent of mint on their breath, and said, I need to test something. Don't move. Before I could ask what they meant, Jordan's face was inches from mine, their eyes focused intently on my lips. My heart hammered in my chest, thoughts racing. Was this happening? Were they about to kiss me? Here, now, surrounded by tools and machine parts? Instead, Jordan whispered, breathe out slowly. Confused but compliant, I exhaled. Jordan closed their eyes briefly, inhaling. Perfect, they said, pulling back with a satisfied nod. No alcohol. I'm sorry, what? I stammered, equal parts disappointed and bewildered. Jordan laughed at my expression. The fuel in this generator is ethanol-based. If there's alcohol on your breath when we start it up, it could be dangerous. Fumes, spark, you know. Safety first. They paused, a mischievous glint in their eye. Though I have to admit, your reaction was pretty entertaining. Were you expecting something else? The teasing tone in their voice made my cheeks flush hot with embarrassment. No, I just wasn't expecting a breath test. Sure, Jordan said, clearly unconvinced but mercifully changing the subject. Let's fire this thing up. The generator sputtered to life on the third pull of the starter cord, the sound surprisingly quieter than I'd expected. Jordan made a few quick adjustments, and suddenly, a string of lights along the patio railing illuminated, casting a warm glow across the small space. It works, I exclaimed, genuinely impressed. Don't sound so surprised, Jordan replied with mock offense. Now for the real test. They disappeared inside, returning moments later with a coffee maker. The true measure of civilization, can it make coffee? We watched with anticipation as Jordan plugged in the machine and pressed the brew button. For a tense moment, nothing happened. Then, the familiar gurgling sound began, and the aroma of fresh coffee soon filled the air. I think we can officially declare this blackout defeated, Jordan said, high-fiving me with childlike enthusiasm. What started as a simple generator test evolved into hours of conversation. We moved 2 chairs to the patio, sipping coffee as Jordan explained how they'd become interested in sustainable energy and self-sufficiency. I found myself sharing stories I rarely told. About growing up in a rural community where power outages were common. About my grandfather teaching me constellation names during those dark nights. About how moving to the city had disconnected me from that part of my life. That's why I built this thing, Jordan admitted, gesturing to the steadily humming generator. Not just for practical reasons, but because it reminds me of simpler times. My grandfather's workshop smelled like motor oil and sawdust. This takes me back there. I get that, I said softly. My apartment's full of technology, but sometimes I miss the quiet of those blackout nights, everyone gathering around candles, telling stories instead of staring at screens. Jordan studied me thoughtfully. Ironic that it took a power outage for us to finally have a real conversation, isn't it? We've lived across from each other for months. I noticed you, I admitted, surprising myself with the confession. In the mailroom, the parking lot. I just never knew what to say beyond hello. Same, Jordan replied, a shy smile playing at the corners of their mouth. Though I did strategically check my mail whenever I saw you heading downstairs. The revelation that our awkward mailroom encounters had been equally intentional on both sides made us laugh, easing the tension that had been building between us. As the night progressed, our chairs somehow migrated closer together until our knees were nearly touching. The generator hummed steadily in the background, a mechanical heartbeat accompanying our conversation. Around midnight, Jordan connected their phone to a small Bluetooth speaker, and soft music drifted through the darkness. The rest of the complex remained silent and dark, making our little island of light and sound feel intimate, almost magical. "Dance with me?" Jordan asked suddenly, standing and offering their hand. Under normal circumstances, with full power, in broad daylight, I might have hesitated, made an excuse about my lack of dancing skills. But there in the generator-powered glow, with the rest of the world seemingly paused around us, I took Jordan's hand without hesitation. We swayed slowly on the small patio, careful not to disturb the generator or tangle ourselves in its cords. Jordan's hand rested lightly on my waist, warm and steady. The scent of coffee mingled with the slight metallic smell of the generator and the natural fragrance of Jordan's shampoo, something herbal and clean. "I should probably confess something," Jordan said, voice low near my ear. "I could have just told you about the ethanol fumes. The breath test was, let's call it, an improvised excuse to get closer to you." I pulled back slightly to look at their face, finding a mixture of mischief and vulnerability there. "That's a pretty elaborate move," I said, trying to sound casual despite my racing heart. "I'm an elaborate person," Jordan replied with a small shrug. "And you have to admit, it worked." "Did it?" I asked, surprising myself with the boldness. Jordan's eyes met mine, searching. "You tell me. You're still here, dancing next to a questionably safe homemade power source in the middle of a blackout." I couldn't argue with that logic. Instead, I closed the small distance between us, pressing my lips gently against Jordan's. The kiss was brief but electric, carrying all the tension and anticipation that had been building since I'd knocked on their door hours earlier. When we separated, Jordan's expression was a mixture of surprise and delight. "If I'd known my generator was such a romantic prop, I'd have invited you over weeks ago." Just then, as if on cue, the generator sputtered once, twice, and went silent. The string lights blinked out, plunging us back into darkness broken only by the distant glow of the lanterns inside. We both burst into laughter at the timing. "I think that's the universe telling us to call it a night," Jordan said, still holding me close. "Or maybe it's just out of fuel," I suggested practically. "Always the romantic," Jordan teased. "But you're probably right. I didn't expect to run it this long." As we moved to disassemble and store the generator, our hands kept finding excuses to touch, passing tools, steadying components, lingering perhaps longer than necessary on shoulders and wrists. The air between us had changed, charged with possibility and unspoken promises. When everything was safely stored, Jordan walked me to their door. "I'd offer to walk you home, but it's literally 30 feet away." "I think I can manage," I replied, lingering in the doorway. "Though this blackout could be dangerous. Maybe we should check on each other in the morning? Make sure we both survive the night." Jordan's smile widened. "Breakfast? I make excellent pancakes on my camp stove." "It's a date," I said, the word date hanging meaningfully between us. As I made my way back to my apartment, navigating by my phone's flashlight, I couldn't help smiling to myself. Who would have thought that a power outage would lead to the most electric night I'd experienced in years? The next morning, I woke to the hum of my refrigerator running again, power restored while I slept. But as I dressed for breakfast at apartment 107, I found myself oddly grateful for the blackout. Sometimes we need the familiar lights of our lives to go out before we can see what's been glowing right in front of us all along. And as for Jordan's homemade generator, well, let's just say we've found plenty of other things to test together since that night. Though none quite as memorable as that first breath test in the darkness, when a power outage sparked something neither of us had expected. Something that, unlike electricity, shows no signs of going out anytime soon. Let me tell you why moments like these matter so much in our increasingly disconnected world. In our daily lives, we're surrounded by conveniences that, while making life easier, often create barriers between us and others. We text instead of talk, email instead of meet, and scroll through social media instead of making eye contact with the person across from us. It sometimes takes the removal of these modern comforts, like during a blackout, to remind us of our fundamental need for human connection. Think about it. How many potential friendships, relationships, or meaningful conversations have we missed because we were too comfortable in our routines, too distracted by our devices, too hesitant to step outside our apartments and knock on a neighbor's door? Sometimes the universe has to turn off the lights to help us see more clearly what matters. That night with Jordan and the generator wasn't just about finding a temporary solution to a power problem. It was about finding connection in an unexpected moment, about the courage it takes to step into the unknown, whether that's a darkened hallway or the vulnerable space of getting to know someone new. It was about how shared challenges can bridge the gaps between us faster than months of passing interactions. So the next time your power goes out, or your phone dies, or your internet connection fails, consider it an invitation rather than an inconvenience. An invitation to look up, look around, and perhaps discover a light you hadn't noticed before, one that was there all along, just waiting for the darkness to make it visible. Total _char_count, 17,842.